Good morning and welcome to another edition of Delessia Law Group's weekly Facebook Live FAQ session where we answer all of your most pressing immigration related questions and concerns. My name is Nicholas Morellis. I'm an associate attorney here at Delessia Law Group, and for today I'll be discussing what you need to know about the naturalization process and becoming a U.S. citizen. Generally speaking, only legal permanent residents can file for naturalization. Now, setting aside how a person could, by birth, already be a U.S. citizen, today's session will really talk about kind of the old school approach to where a person has been a legal permanent resident, a green card holder for a period of time, and they're thinking, you know what, instead of renewing my green card for another 10 years, why don't I file for my citizenship? Why don't I naturalize and become a U.S. citizen? When I get this call, when we get this email, I always ask the same set of questions to kind of evaluate whether a person has the ability to file. The first question will always be, how long have you had your green card? The general rule of thumb is that you would have had to have had your legal permanent residency for a minimum period of 5 years. Now, there's a caveat to that for legal permanent residences, U.S. or green card holders who receive their legal permanent residency through a U.S. citizen spouse and are still married to that spouse. For those people, and potentially if you're listening to this or watching this, you might be that person, you can actually file for your U.S. naturalization in 3 years. So it's a very big difference. 5 years is a long time to wait. A lot of people are excited to vote. A lot of people are excited to kind of get through and no longer have to worry about fees and USCIS, and realistically, the climate that we're in now, a lot of people are excited just not to have to worry about their own background when they're traveling, and a lot of insecurities along when you're traveling back in the United States and going through a phone or something like that. So naturalization is always a great option. And so 5 years or 3 years, again, is that caveat. And that's usually my first question. The next question I always ask is, have you been up to date on your taxes? Have you been arrested since you've had your green card? We have cases where people have had their residency for 30 years. We've had cases where people have had their residency, for 4 years, going on 5 years. And it's one of these things where good moral character is this umbrella term used by USCIS that goes to, are you up to date on your taxes? Not necessarily if you owe taxes, but that's just you filed and that you are up to date on those. Have you been arrested? Okay, if somebody says they have, DUI once upon a time, shoplifting, I was arrested for kind of a severe crime, but there was, I wasn't convicted, went to trial, etc. A good attorney, and what our office does is we go through those documents. We confirm whatever is in your background, whether it's criminal, if you've ever been in removal proceedings, deportation proceedings, whether before or during your residency, we go over those as well. Because like that 5 year or potentially 3 year requirement, confirming your good moral character is going to be a minimum evaluation we do prior to saying, you know what, we think you're going to be eligible. Some other things that you need to be over the age of 18. You need to be able to take an exam. There's a lot of folklore about the exam. Oh my God, how many questions do I have to ask? Do I have to be fluent in English? A lot of those things, as an office, we prepare you for. One thing that the Delessia Law Group really prides ourselves on is that we're going to be with you from the very beginning all the way to the end. And oftentimes what that means is we hold your hand through the prep leading up to that interview. A lot of times the interview, people are so scared, what if I get an answer incorrect? What if I mess up because English isn't my first language? We really try to inspire and encourage people to practice. We provide you those documents, or rather that list of questions, government, civics, and history, and really try to give you a play-by-play on what to expect. Now that a person's thinking about naturalization, now that a person understands they are eligible, now that they understand they're up to date on their taxes, they have no arrest issues, and now that they're not so worried about the exam portion, especially because they're going to have some time prior to the interview with that exam will be issued, you get to a point where you say, okay, what's next? Along with a copy of a green card front and back, a filing fee that recently changed, so that could, you could be watching this at a time when that filing fee changes. You're you're looking at also including 2 passport photos and the application. Now, that application is nice and long. It's going to ask you a lot of history, and oftentimes it'll ask you about the last 5 years. And generally speaking, 5 years is what they're looking at. Even if you have a criminal issue from 20 years ago, or you owe taxes, you didn't file taxes 7 years ago, but now you're up to date. Reaching out to us, going over these issues is something we like to do so that we can let you know the 5 years is the period they're looking at. Things prior to that 5 years may be an issue, but let's talk about it. Moving forward with the naturalization process, one thing I always want to make clear is that if your underlying green card is set to expire, and a lot of people do file for naturalization because their green card is going to expire, we always talk about the idea of concurrently filing that I-90 or a green card renewal. In the event either the naturalization takes longer than expected, let's say something happens and you're denied, you don't want to be without your green card. Now, it's recommended that people do this. It's not necessarily something you have to do, and practitioners and attorneys alike will debate this fact. I always recommend people do it because you need to have an unexpired green card with you or some evidence of your residency at all times. That is a law. So that's something we recommend as well. But once filed, there'll be a biometrics, a fingerprinting appointment that's done about a month later, and then you wait, and you wait for that interview. Depending on where you're filing and depending on where you're watching this, the interviews could be set as early as 4 or 5 months. Sometimes it's closer to 10 months. It's really going to be dependent on the local office and how busy they are to get you set up for an interview. But lo and behold, you go to your interview, you pass it, you go through the application, everything checks out, you pass the exam, voila, and the second to the last step is now complete. You've now been recommended for citizenship, and now you're waiting for that oath ceremony to arrive. Oath ceremonies are set up by the federal courts in your district, and oftentimes there's a few each month. There's going to be thousands of people that are going to be in that event as well. And then once your oath ceremony is set, you get a notice in your mail. Potentially your attorney gets it in the mail as well. And it's at that time, when you're sworn in, that a naturalization certificate is provided to you. It has your photo, it has your information establishing you're now a U.S. citizen. And oftentimes that's the last piece of the puzzle to be able to apply for a U.S. passport. And so that's kind of a general overview of naturalization. There's so many questions I'm sure you have. There's so many what ifs, and I've heard. Absolutely reach out to us. We have several ways, whether it's commenting on this video, Facebook, messaging us directly, even just commenting on our wall. That's always something we recommend. Email as well as phone call is recommended as well, because we're always excited to get your questions, your concerns, and really try to calm your anxieties when it comes to both naturalization as well as really any immigration related features at all. Please tune in next week for another installment of our Facebook FAQ sessions. And it's been a pleasure. This is Nicholas Morales for D'Alessio Law Group. We will see you next week.